recognize that this man, God lives through this man, and wow, it keeps you on your knees. But 30 years of experience in mission work and now training, and the stories are just incredible. The question today, man, is one I am just going to have my antennas up. I want to know, how do you know when God is answering my prayer? How many would say that you don't have an answer, and how many like you have something you're praying for and it doesn't seem like God's hearing the prayers? We all, like tons of things, right? We know God hears, we know He answers, but so we're all just very interested in this subject, and I know God's going to use Dale powerfully. Let's pray and ask God's presence to be here. Heavenly Father, thank you. Thank you for camp meeting. And thank you that we can be here today in this room, in your presence, Lord. Lord, we are all weak people that need you desperately. And Lord, as we are people of prayer, trying to figure this thing of prayer out, I just pray that you use Dale to speak through him, and may we learn something we can take with us as we leave this place today. In Jesus' name, amen.
You know, this is interesting. I just came back from Company Game just a few weeks ago, and we were opening a new training center. So we were opening a new training center, and there were no chairs. And we had a room a little bit bigger than this one. We had like 350 people in there. They're all sitting on the floor. And it was hot. Like really hot. Just from all those people, the body heat. Anyway, so I was looking around here thinking, there's plenty of space. So, can anybody tell me one thing that they remember from yesterday that really stood out to them? What's one thing that stood out from yesterday?
They prayed for 100 years.
100-year prayer. Okay, 100-year prayer. Now, she opened the subject up, right? So blame her on this. I have a book here for somebody to tell me a lesson. Now, one person only, right? So one lesson they learned, something that came out of that 100-year prayer. You can tell me a lesson, like something that came out of the 100-year prayer. Yes?
Just don't give up.
Okay. I'll let you have that. So I'll give you a choice here. So, can someone be very specific, like something that came out of that 100-year prayer? Remember, they prayed for 100 years, right? And there's a couple of specific things that happened. We mentioned yesterday. Very specific things that happened. Yes.
They sent over so many missionaries.
They started a mission movement. That's correct. A mission movement came out of that. So you have a choice. Also, if you want the Escape from the Killing Fields, I have it in my backpack. So if you'd rather have that one, you can have it. I guess this is a children's service.
Okay.
Just so you know. Okay. And then one more question. What was the name of the town where Cornelius lived? I challenge you to go back and read that, right? So who did it? Caesarea. Okay, if you want the full name, if you want to go and Google it out, Caesarea Maritima, right? So because it was built on the coast. Now, there's something interesting about Caesarea that you may not know. Herod the Great paid a lot of attention to Caesarea, and he learned about concrete. This was the time frame when people didn't know about concrete prior to this. They used lime. They had ways of using lime, but not concrete. That would dry underwater, hydraulic concrete, right? And so as he learned about hydraulic concrete, he's like, I want to order tons and tons and hundreds of tons of concrete. So he ordered it, and they came in shiploads full of it, and he used that to help build Caesarea, the docks. So he was a very, one of these guys that likes all the high-tech stuff, whatever was new, he wanted to use that. So just a little tidbit to throw out there. Okay. And then I wanted to share one thing with you. This is extra. You did not pay for this. Okay, this is like a free gift from me to you. I need one person to volunteer to help me. Can I get one young, energetic, enthusiastic thank you? So, did Jesus say anything about the harvest being full, but not enough workers? And what did he say? I want you to pray for workers to send into the field. Is that true or not? Okay, so because we're talking about prayer, I just wanted to tell you that the need truly is great, right? So currently, about 40% of the world's population is considered unreached, which means that they do not have any believers living in their communities, right? They don't currently have access to the gospel. So what does 40% of the Earth's population look like? It's more than 3 billion people. So how many is 3 billion? We often struggle with understanding. So I'm just going to throw this out there, just so you can pray, right, responsibly. If those 3 billion people held hands, okay, so they're gonna hold hands, and we're gonna make a big circle. How big would the circle be? So this is the earth. There's a green earth right there. You can hold that. Stretch it out that way. Here's the moon. Now, if they were holding hands, making a huge circle, right? So if you stand back that way, they totally stay between the two. Right? So if that's the earth right there, here's the moon. If the earth is exactly in the center of that big circle, the outside of the circle would be right where my fingers are. It would be a huge circle. Like, that's how many unreached people there are. Okay, just saying, the work isn't done yet. Right? The harvest is plentiful. We need to what? So here's another way of looking at that 3 billion people that we're praying for. If this building right here, if all of these unreached people stood in a line outside of our church, you stood in a huge long line, waiting for an opportunity for us to preach the gospel to them, and if we organized ourselves so that we could preach the gospel to them, every 11 seconds we could preach to somebody new. Every 11 seconds we could get another person, preach the gospel. They would come in, we preach the gospel. Every 11 seconds. The line outside of our door with 3 billion people will be long enough to go from the earth, like back to back, like from the earth to the moon, and back again, back to the moon, and back again, and head back on its way to the moon. That's how long the line would be. And if every 11 seconds we preach the gospel to them, right? Every 11 seconds we preach to a new person, and we did that non-stop for 1,000 years. And then went outside the door to see how long the line still was. There'd be more people standing in line than walked the face of the earth when Christ first gave the Great Commission. I'm just telling you, the harvest is, the workers are, thank you. And that's why Christ said to what? Pray that the Lord send more workers into the harvest. Thank you. Okay, so just want to give you something to pray for. And having said that, I just want to take a few seconds to do that. Just pray for laborers. Lord God, it's a privilege to stand here. It's a privilege to have access to truth. we also recognize there's a responsibility that comes with truth. And you've asked us not only to go as laborers, but also to pray for laborers. And we'd like to do that, Lord, just to ask that you would send forth laborers into the harvest and help us here in this room to know how we can also assist in bringing that gospel to the unreached for Christ's sake. Okay, move on. So I clarified my goal yesterday. Today our goal is I want every participant, everybody in this room, to be able to at least have 2 lessons about communication with God that you won't forget. I'm going to present several, but I want you to have at least 2 that you walk away with that you remember and you're not going to forget. That's my goal. So what I'm hoping you'll do as we give the presentation today, that you'll listen to them and you'll pick out 2 and you'll tell yourself, look, these 2 I just want to hold on to, right? These are like the most relevant for me. I want to hold on to them. If you listen to all of them on a very superficial level, a week from now you won't remember any of those. So I want you just to hold on to at least 2, just grab on to them and say, look, these are special for me, I'm going to hold on to them. Make sense? How many are you going to select? 2. Okay. That's our goal. And I'm going to be honest with you. I woke up this morning. I try to complete at least 5 complete sleep cycles every night, right? And, which means getting 7.5 hours. And if I do that, I function. I can do well on 4, but if I get 5, I can actually think. Okay? And so I woke up with 5 this morning and completed 5 nice sleep cycles. And when I woke up, the first thing that came to my mind is, Dale, you're missing something. And here's the deal. There's one point I want to make. We're talking about ways that God communicates with humans, right? And I woke up thinking, you missed one. And it's probably the most important one on the list. And so I'm battling, even now, I'm wrestling with this, because that one is going to take me a half hour to cover, or close to it. And so I'm trying to figure out if I already had my 1 hour and a half, sorted out, what am I going to do with this extra one? So, and the extra one has to do with God's communication and church unity. And that's why I'm wrestling with this, right? And so I'm just letting you know, I'm going to be wrestling with this as we're speaking. And I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to manage this so I get this extra one in there. Okay. So you can be praying for me as we do that. So how do I know when God's answering my prayer? There's 2, I'm breaking this into 2 pieces. Number 1 is 3 warnings, okay, about answered prayer. I think it's wise to have warnings in there where necessary. And 10 communication principles and methods, how God communicates with us. So there's 7 of those and 3 warnings, and we'll start with the 3 warnings. And this first one is taken from the book of 1 Samuel, and we're looking at chapters 14 and 28. And I have a tendency to use the Hebrews 11 teaching model when I'm working with Seventh-day Adventists, and I shift to a different model when I'm working with people who are predominantly not Seventh-day Adventists. I'm assuming that we have people here that are fairly well versed in Scripture. So I have a question for you. This will help me to know how to proceed from here. How many of you are familiar with the story of King Saul in 1 Samuel? You've read 1 Samuel more than once, okay? How many of you are not familiar with the story? And don't be bashful about raising your hand. Okay, there's a couple of you. So what I'll do is I'll give a quick overview. Here, I'll back up a second. The Hebrews 11 model, when Hebrews 11, when the author of Hebrews writes chapter 11, he tells us about 15 or 20 different people in the Old Testament, but he doesn't tell any of their stories, right? He jumps straight to the lesson learn from them. But he's assuming that the reader already knows the whole story. Right? He says, well, faith, like Abraham, and like, oh yeah, and like Moses, and like, he could just go on that list there, because he's assuming that the audience is already familiar with those stories. He just jumps straight to the point. You can't do that if people don't know the stories, because you just go straight to the point, and people are wondering, like, what are you talking about? Okay, so 1 Samuel 14, the story that we're talking about. So we have King Saul. This is in ancient Israel, and so we have King Saul. He's the first recognized king of Israel, and Israel actually demanded that God give them a king. And this is the king that was chosen. And if I look at this and say, well, this is exactly what the people wanted, maybe not necessarily what God wanted, but he was what they wanted, like huge. And he actually did a good job of, kicking the Philistines out, right? But there was constant battles between them. And in chapter 14, the Philistines are presenting their huge armies in front of Israel, and King Saul is there, and he has a very small army. Most of his army is afraid, the soldiers are afraid, run away, they're hiding in various places. He's just got a few people there. And it mentions that in the prior chapter 13, that the Philistines had enough control over Israel that they took away all their files, and there's no blacksmiths, they had no way of sharpening tools or making implements. I did a little research on what it cost. It says like, I think it was a pin, to sharpen the goat. So I'm trying to figure out how much is that, right? So we're talking about like days' wages. I think it was 10 days' wages, like to sharpen tools, which is ridiculous. Like, so, even so, as we see Saul here with the soldiers, if they're bringing like sickles and hoes, to fight with, even they are dull because it costs too much to sharpen. So you see this pretty pathetic situation that Saul is in. And his son is pretty brave and trusts God. Says, yeah, let's do it. And he tells his armor bearer, let's go fight the Philistines by ourselves. Like, we don't need a huge army. God can save by the two of us just as well as he can save, by a huge, massive army. So Jonathan and his armor bearer get out early in the morning, and they head across the valley, climb up a mountain, and they begin attacking the Philistines, just the two of them. And it says that Jonathan had a sword, but it doesn't mention his armor bearer. And so then the story we read is that Jonathan knocks him down, and his armor bearer finishes him off. And so that makes sense, because Jonathan's one with a sword, right? So you get this picture of what's taking place there. And God works with Jonathan, and the ground begins shaking. Philistines are dying, and the rest of them are afraid, and they begin running. So Saul, he's on the other side of the valley here. He's looking over and saying, wow, look at what's happening with the Philistine camp. The ground's shaking, everybody's running. And so he's trying to figure out, like, now what do I do? And so he tells the priest, there's a priest there, he tells the priest, he says, quick, get the ephod. The ephod is this thing that the priest wears. It has like two stones on it, and God communicates through the two stones. They light up, right? One or the other, yes or no. So he has this little way of communicating. He says, get the ephod. I want to ask God what to do. So the priest gets the ephod, and as the priest comes over where Saul is with the ephod, because he wants to ask God a question and get an answer. The priest is bringing it. Saul is watching what's going on out there, and he says, forget the ephod. I want to get vengeance on my enemies. I'm afraid they're going to get away. He tells the soldiers, let's go fight. He says, by the way, if any of you eat a thing today before the sun goes down, you're cursed. I want to get vengeance on my enemies. So they fight. Well, Jonathan doesn't hear that. Jonathan is out there fighting. And in the midst of the day, they're all in battle. He's hungry. He sees honey dripping on the ground. He takes a stick, pokes it in the honey, licks the end of it, and someone says, didn't you hear what your dad said? He's like, no, I wasn't there. He said that if anybody eats before the sun goes down, they're cursed. And Jonathan's like, that was silly. Like, all these people, these soldiers are starving. And they're fighting hard all day. Like, there's food here. The Philistines are running away. We could have eaten. Anyway, day's over. The army gathers around. And the soldiers are so hungry, they begin killing animals and eating the food with the blood. Now, what has God said? No blood. And so Saul says, no, wait a second. Like stop it, bring your animals over here, let's do it properly. Okay. So then he says, okay, let's go, everybody's eating now, let's go and finish the Philistines off. Let's just go fight, attack them until the morning the sun comes up. We'll finish them off. And the priest says, don't you think we should ask God first? Like we didn't have time this morning. Should we try it now? And Saul's like, oh, yeah, good idea. Bring the ephod here. Let's ask God. And so they bring the ephod and they ask God, like, what should we do? Should we go or not? And what happens? God doesn't answer. Now, this is significant because in the morning, Saul didn't have time to ask God and wait for an answer. Right? So in the afternoon, what happens? God doesn't have time. Are you with me? Yeah. So here's the point. Like Saul feels like this ephod, that I can just go to it anytime I need it when it's convenient for me. I'll just go to it, ask God a question, and He has to answer me. Like He's just going to give me an answer when it's convenient for me. Other than that, I'll just like take my prayer time, and I'll kind of move that around to whatever is convenient for me. I got my other things I'm wanting to do. Just get all my other stuff done. When it's convenient, I'll come and I'll talk to God, and He'll give me an answer. And he learned a valuable lesson that God doesn't work like that. Like, and the thing I want to point out this morning is that prayer isn't this thing where we just like it's the prayer itself is magic. In fact, I don't even like the word prayer. And I don't mean to be sacrilegious, but most of when you read in the book of Genesis, like God talked to people and people talk to God, right? I think when you put a name on it and say prayer, now it's a separate thing over here. We're not talking to God, He's talking to us. We have this separate entity called prayer. We write prayers down, we read prayers, we recite prayers, we memorize prayers, and the prayer itself is what people focus on as opposed to God, right? So that's a bit of a concern to me that we can talk about powerful prayers and this guy, he's a really good prayer, so we've got to go talk to him. That's a bit distracting, I think, to the real issue, which is having a relationship with God and committing your life to God, right? So that's what we want to protect. And I don't think Saul understood that. And he was doing things that was corroding his relationship with God and still expecting to be able to go to Him and get answers whenever he wanted. It makes sense? Yeah, so if there's a lesson we can learn from that is that God's not like that. You can't, God's not this like machine, just go in and put $1 in it and get a candy bar out like anytime you need it. We're talking about a relationship with God. That's what we need, is a relationship, right? And He didn't do that. He didn't have time for that. He didn't have time for a relationship. He just wanted the answers when He needed it. Okay, so that's what I encourage us all as we think about prayer to think about the relationship, right? And treasure that. The other thing I wanted to mention, hang on. Okay, one more thing. So if you move on to 1 Samuel chapter 28, this is a chapter where eventually at the end of Saul's life, the Philistines are gathering together to battle, and Saul is there, and he realizes, okay, these Philistines are coming in, and I don't have much time left. And he was desperate, like really desperate. And actually, his entire life, he actually killed priests by the dozen. Like he was a tough dude and fighting against God. At the end of his life, he's like, God, you gotta help me. You gotta help me. And he asked God what he should do. And if you read 1 Samuel 28, I'm going to actually get my Bible out. Sorry, I was a little bit unprepared. 1 Samuel 28. If you have a Bible here, it's a good time to look it up. Okay. 1 Samuel 28. So, so if you look at verse 15. Oh, hang on. So at the very beginning of the chapter, verse 6. So when Saul inquired of the Lord did not answer him either by dreams or by Urim, or the ephod, right, or by prophets. Now, this is insightful for two reasons. One, it tells us like God simply did not answer Saul. Saul had turned his back on God, walked away from God his entire life. And at the very end, he's now that he is suffering the consequences of his own bad behavior, he's desperate for God to help him. And he had pushed God so far away, God just didn't accept him anymore. Like he'd gone too far, right? Okay, so God refused to answer him. So that's one thing we can learn from that. Like it is possible to walk so far away from God. Like you can walk so far away that it's not that God's not willing to accept you back, but Saul's quest to come back was disingenuous. You know, that we can deceive ourselves, but we have to be careful of that, right? So okay, and then the other thing we learned from that is, what are the most common ways that God talked to his people back in this time frame? Dreams, to his prophets, and to the ephod, right? Okay, and so if you want to look back and say, well, how did God talk to people back in those days? It's right there, very common ways. And notice it does not say, at this point, casting lots. Right? Why do you think it does not say casting lots? So, okay, so if you look back in 1 Samuel 14, what happened? Yeah, so at the end of chapter 14, at the very end of the day, they asked God for guidance, right? And God didn't answer it. Right? So then what is Saul's next step? Let's cast lots and figure out what caused this problem. He says, God cast a perfect lot. He's telling God what to do, and they cast lots, and does the lot casting thing work? Yes or no? No, it doesn't work. Because it selects the only righteous person in the entire country, which is Jonathan. So it's quite obvious that whole thing didn't work. And so, you know, I find it fascinating that when asking God directly for help, he's not answering us. It's easy for us to try to find another way to force him to answer, and eventually we get down to, you know, solutions that really don't work. Like whichever one of these sticks is the longest one, you know, that's what God wants. You know, and it didn't work because it actually selected the absolute wrong person, right? Anyway, just wanted to point that out. I think it's wise for us to be cautious. But okay, so if you're going to learn a lesson from this, we want to make sure that we stay close to God all the time, right? Stay close to God all the time, and yeah, okay. The next morning, is a hindered prayer warning. So if you look at 1 Peter 3:7, I'll just make this a quick point here. If you read 1 Peter 3:7, which we'll do, First Peter 3:7, it says, husbands likewise dwell with them, your wives, with understanding, giving honor to the wife as to the weaker vessel, not less valuable. Didn't say that. And as being heirs together of the grace of God, that your prayers may not be hindered. Like, so there's a valuable lesson there. You can't abuse God's children and still expect God to answer you and help you out when you need it. Does that make sense? Like, if you're abusing God's children, like, it's hard for him to accept that abuse to his children and still give you the help you need when you need it. Oh yeah, I'll help this guy out. Because the more he helps you, the more you're going to be abusing other people, right? And quite often, if God speaks to you and helps you out, people, yeah, I have an in with God. You know, God and I, we're real close. He would be supporting that kind of thinking, you know, and you would feel more justified in heaping more abuse on people. So he has to, like, not talk to you in order to let you know you're making a mistake, right? To help bring you back to line. Okay, so there's a heated prayer principle, 1 Peter 3:7. There's a pleasant choice warning. And this is a fascinating one. If you read 1 Kings 13, we have this fascinating story. So you have the kingdom of Israel split. So you have Israel on the north and Judah on the south. And the kingdom to the north, their first king, Jeroboam, he started idol worship. So God sent a prophet, an unnamed prophet, to go out there and talk to him. And God told him, look, you enter the kingdom, you go talk to him, you come back, don't eat food, don't sleep, don't drink water, just go out there, get your job done, and come back. So the prophet goes up there, he gives a prophecy against the idol, and he says the idol's going to split, you know, and actually going to come out. He has this long, not long, but short, succinct prophecy. And the king looks at him and says, hey, grab that guy. And the soldiers, as you're going to grab him, the king's arm withers up. Okay, so his arm withers up, and then the king is distraught. He says, oh man. And he tells the prophet, please pray for me that my arm is going to be okay again. So the prophet prays for him, his arm is okay, and the king says, come to my house, I'll reward you. And what does the prophet say? I can't. God told me I can't. I just have to go home by a different way than I came. I can't eat or drink right here, I stay home. So he heads home. Now the Bible mentions another prophet, like an old prophet. He sees this young guy, you know, heading home. He hears what happened, and he quickly sends his son to go rushes over there. Give him a donkey. So he heads out there. He finds this young prophet. He says, hey, I just want you to know that I want you to come back and eat with me. He says, no, I can't. God told me I had to go home a different way than I came. I can't eat or drink. I said to go straight home. He says, yeah, but God told me that I'm supposed to come and get you and bring you home. So what did the young prophet do? He went home with the guy and ate. And then God said, listen, you disobeyed me. You know, the pleasant choice warning. If we have two options, you know, God says this or God says that, it's easy for us to choose the one that is the most pleasant. Sometimes, even though that pleasant option is disregarding what God has clearly told us. Are you with me? There's a warning there. If someone comes, oh, God told me this, a lot of people say God told them stuff. A lot of people do. We have to stand firmly on what we know God said, right? Not just what someone said God said. We have to stand firmly on what we know God said. and not just do what everybody else says, even if it is pleasant to us. Make sense? Okay. We're going to look at 7 communication principles and or methods. So this is like the positive now. And I'll start with a real simple one. This is the prayer plus logic principle. I'm not going to go into huge elaboration here. I just want to say, look, if a young lady is looking for a husband who's interested in missions, like she wants a godly husband interested in missions, where should she not go looking for her husband? At the bar. If you want a godly husband who's interested in missions, where would be a good place to find him? In church. And where else might be an even better place to find him? In the mission field. Like that's where they're going to be. That's where they're going to be. So prayer plus logic. Just ask yourself, like, where is the most reasonable place, okay, to expect an answer for this question I have, right? Okay, so prayer plus logic, just something to think about. I pointed out there. Okay, now we have the 750-mile principle. And this is one that I think we need to hold on to and treasure. We often miss it. So if you read in Acts 16, verses 6 to 10, which we will do, hang on. I treasure the book of Acts. There's so much here we often overlook. We're very quick when we go through the book of Acts. We need to slow down. So Acts 16, so verse 6. It says, now when they had gone through Phrygia, and I'll give you a little background, because sometimes it's helpful just to think carefully about what we're reading. So Paul has already begun his missionary journeys, right? God had called him out in chapter 13, sends him out to, he's at Antioch, sends him out to begin his missionary journey, which he does. 13 and chapter 14, he's engaged his missionary journey. We'll come back and visit that in a few minutes here. Chapter 15, he brings the request to the Jerusalem council, to the new Gentiles, you can be circumcised or not. And then chapter 16, he begins carrying this letter from the Jerusalem council saying, no, they do not have to be circumcised. He carries this letter out, and it mentions just before this that he takes that letter and he takes it out to all the new churches he started and he's encouraging them. And I'm looking for, I was trying to figure out how to get a big map in here. If this is the area where he's working, there's a sea up here, there's a sea down here, and it goes around this way, right? So this is like a piece of land. Saul Tarsus is down here, this is the Mediterranean. So he comes up this way, they begin work here, and he actually moves all the way up in here. Like he's got this huge area where he's been working. And so as we get to chapter 16, he decides, okay, I've worked all the way through here, now where do I go? He says, well, I'm going to start down here and work my way up this way and just completely take off this huge area. Just get this whole thing done. Right? So he's very strategic in how he's working. He gets a big spot here, comes down here, he wants to work up this way. So he comes down here, which is the place they call Asia. He's going to work in Asia. And what does God tell him? So when they had gone through Phrygia and the region of Galatia, that area I just mentioned, they were forbidden by the Holy Spirit to preach the word Asia. They head towards Asia, and God says no. So what do they do next? Well, let's go north. It's the only choice they have. We've already gone east and south there, so we can't go here, but we go north. So they go up towards Bithynia. Well, Bithynia is a section up here, so you're going to head up here. And they get up there to the border of Bithynia, they begin entering Bithynia, and what does God say? No. It's like, okay, so I've already done this. I can't go down here. I can't go up here. So he begins heading this way. So he heads towards Troas. And he begins walking towards Troas. By the time he gets to Troas, I bet you can't guess how many miles he's walked. 750 miles. 750 miles. Now, I just want to point one thing out. Who is with him all this time? Okay, Silas is with him. Not Silas. Yeah, Silas is with him. Who else is with him?
The Apostle Luke.
Timothy. Yeah, Timothy is with him. He selected Timothy back where he actually just got recently given stoned, right? That's the area where he gets Timothy. And so Timothy gets a chance to walk with this fellow for 750 miles. All that time, guess what Paul is talking to Timothy about? About getting stoned, you know, right? He explained what happened. He said, listen, sometimes we are persecuted and abused, but that's okay, right? And they get down there to Asia. God says no. He says it's okay. You know, God did not clarify where to go. He only said where not to go. Is that okay? So did Paul say, oh, God said we can't go there, so we might as well go home? No. What did he say? Try somewhere else. So we walk, you know, you can imagine how many miles they're walking, hundreds of miles more, right? And they get up to Bithynia, and so we're going to work here. And God says, nope. And Timothy says, so now do we go home? And what did Paul say? No. No, we are called to missions, and we're going to go to missions. If God says no, we're going to keep on walking. Like that kind of persistence, God doesn't always tell you what He wants you to do or where He wants you to go. He doesn't always tell you. What is He expecting you're going to do? Move off of principle. The Great Commission is still there. Go into all the world, right? Make disciples of all nations. That statement did not suddenly disappear simply because God said don't work in Asia. Are you with me? Like if you have a clear statement in the Bible saying this is what I want you to do, keep doing it. So he says, okay, Asia doesn't work, we're going to head up into Bithynia. That doesn't work, no worries, we're going to head over to Troas. He's continuing to push to accomplish what he believes God has asked him to do. He's working on principle at this point, not on a clear, thus says the Lord, go to, wherever. At what point does he get the final revelation that says, look, we have a dream that says, come over into Macedonia and help us? Is not until he gets to Troas. He's walked 750 miles. So to me, this is a fascinating principle, how God communicates. He often expects you to do what is already clear based on principle. The Bible says, look, this is what you should be doing. He expects us to do that before we get fine-tuning. Are you with me? Okay, so if you've already got a clear biblical, thus says the Lord, you're expected to actually follow that. That's the first place we go for Bible answers is the Word. And if you need fine-tuning, God can provide it when He knows you need it. Until then, just keep moving forward doing what you know is right. Make sense? Okay. Then we have the slide. So the 750-mile principle is going from general to specific. God gives us general information. We're expected to follow that. And after we've done that, then He can give us the specific. And then we have from specific to general, which is the opposite of that. In this case, if you read Acts 13 and 14, in Acts 13, God calls Paul and Barnabas into missions. And if you continue reading, we don't get any more clarification about which towns he's supposed to go to. We just get that general call, you are to be involved in missions, right? And so it's up to him then to apply that call. I said, well, I'm going to start missions. So he goes out and he begins working. And Paul knows that God called him also to work with the Gentiles. Okay? And, yeah. Okay, so I'll leave that there. So sometimes we go from specific to general. Then we have the talking road principle. And this is the one I find fascinating. The doctrine I'm writing is a whole chapter on the girl from Little Water. So story of Ruth. Ruth wants to serve God. Not really sure how. She knows her mother-in-law is really a righteous person. So she's like, I want to be just like her. I'm not leaving her. Does she know what her next steps are? No. She just begins that journey trusting that God will lead as she goes, right? And she does. Esther, same thing. We don't have any clear thus of the Lord to Esther. She just knows what the right thing is, and she just begins doing the steps that she thinks this only makes the most sense. She begins that journey, trusting that God will work out the details as she goes. And he does. Peter and Cornelius, Peter's up on the roof. God does not tell him all that's going on. He just gives him his dream 3 times. And then this guy shows up saying, look, Cornelius sent me to get you. And Peter has no idea what's going on here. He just knows that God revealed to him a little bit, and that is that he's supposed to go. And so he goes, just trusting that God's going to sort out the details as he goes, right? And sometimes God works like that. He doesn't give us all the answer. He just gives us enough to get us started. Make sense? And there's a lot of Christians that say, I'm not doing it unless God reveals everything to me. Like, I have to approve it first. But sometimes we need to say, no, if God gives us the first piece, we need to take that and just continue moving with it, trusting that He'll open up the doors as we go. Okay, so I applied that principle back in 1996. My wife and I were in the beginning. We knew we needed to have we were living in a hub, a government hub, like a little government station. There's 5 different tribal groups around us. And we were trying to figure out, like, of those 5 tribal groups, which tribal group should we be working with? And my field director showed up. He was just there for like a few hours. He had a plane fly in, then had to fly out. But during those few hours, he told me, he said, look, I want you to look very carefully at these five tribal groups and ask the question, which is the least likely to be impacted by the gospel as understood by the Seventh-day Adventist Church in the next 10 years if you don't offer it? Which is the least likely to have access to the gospel if you don't offer it, right? And he told me to go to the least likely. So we began doing a little research project trying to figure out which is the least likely. And also because FM works with hundreds of people, I wanted to make sure that they were indeed reached, that they already had, the gospel, that churches all over the place. I'm not going there. And so we were trying to figure that out. And we were praying for guidance. And one day, we began the day, we were praying, just asking God to lead and guide us, and wondering where should we be working. I had to go to town, so I jumped in the truck and began heading. We had a road. It's a potholed thing, very short. It took often a couple of hours. It was only like 40 miles, full driving. Sometimes it was like pea soup this deep. We actually went one time and there was these guys sitting around a little metal table in the middle of the highway. I'm like, what are they sitting around this table for? In the middle of the highway playing cards. Like, I was wondering, why would we do that? As I got closer, I realized it was actually the sunroof of a bulldozer. You didn't guess what the bulldozer was, right? Anyway, so we were traveling on this little road, and the road was only long enough really to connect Fight Talk, the village that we lived in, the community we were staying, with the provincial capital. I say capital, don't think big town. Like, it's just a little dot, like, on the map, like, just, like, pinprick. Just a few people live there. It's mostly like a village with a few buildings. So we were heading that direction, praying that God would guide us. And I saw this girl on the side of the road. And this to tell the story really deserves like a half hour. I'm not going to take that long, but I will say that she had this massive ulcer on the side of the leg. So I've never seen stuff here in the States like I've seen over there, but the hole was big enough you could see like bones and veins and stuff in there. And it was all raw. It was putrefied. It was stuck. It reeked. It was just really bad. Like the pus and just a rot that was there. And I drove by. I looked at that. Like, wait a second. I hit the brakes, backed up. said, look, girl, you gotta go to the hospital. Like, I'm heading over to, there's a small, I say hospital, like a few trailer houses on stilts, you know, just think like that. So we gotta get you over there and they get treated out. So I got in the back of the truck and was gonna take you down there to get treatment. And as I got in the driver's seat, like there's a bunch of people wanting to go to market. And like they said, oh, she's going, we're going too. So they fill up the back of the truck. So it's so full that there's no room for her. And so they force her to get out. So I got ready to leave, and I stepped back in the back just to make sure everybody's sitting down, you know, and be safe. And I realized, like, where's the girl at? And I noticed she's sitting over there where she was to start with by herself. I was like, no. She's going. So get yourselves arranged however you need to, but she's going. And they realized after a while I wasn't leaving unless she was there. So when I got out, she got in. I got back around the front, got in the driver's seat, and headed down the road. When I got to Carolina, the provincial capital, I stopped at the market, so all these guys could get off. And I went back to tell the girl that we were going to the hospital next, and she wasn't there. They had forced her to get out. When I left there, they quickly forced her to get out, and the guy jumped in as I was driving off. So I was upset about that, you know, because I really felt bad. Like this girl was the pain. You can't imagine the pain that she had, and how many months that had been going on. So, like, I'm finding this girl, and from now on, she's got an uncle, and her uncle's going to take care of her. Like, if she ever needs help, I want her to know that there's someone going to fight for her, right? So I went back, and I'll be honest with you here, I spent months looking for her. I traveled to the mountains. I traveled so far, all the way through the bush there, looking for that kid. Never found her. Never found her. But I just wanted to, I just felt like this is someone that has, these kids, half of the kids in our area were orphans. Half of them, they didn't have mom and dad, so someone would take them. Like half of them were orphans. And their parents, you know, that just died. Like, I don't know, we had the whole villages where no one, whole villages where the oldest person in the entire community was like 25, 28 years old. Death rate was so high. And so many mothers died in childbirth. It wasn't funny, it was just scary. Anyway, set that aside. So the point I want to make is we spent a lot of time looking for this kid. And in the process of looking for this kid, I was all over the place. And in that process of trying to find her, I met so many other people that were in a similar circumstances. Like one day I began carrying this backpack full of gauze and, you know, antibiotics. And like one day I treated more than 150 ugly sores, and, you know, a few of the people in the cases had malaria, you know, or pneumonia, diarrhea, blood diarrhea, that was very common. But these sores, these nasty sores, were just terrible. But I never found the kid, right? But here's what happened. After several months, community members from this huge community began coming to my house at Fight Talk and begging me to go live with them. Begging me, like, so we know you care. He said, people have come up here and talked about the gospel to us before, but they've also abused our lives, taken our money, they've beaten us. Like, we don't want that. He said, we hear them talk about the gospel, we don't know what it is. Like, they say good news, but what they brought hasn't been good news. Like, we trust you. If you'd be willing to come here and help us understand what good news is, we want to hear it. And like the second time the group, like they had a delegation of people come down and ask us, said, okay, we're coming. We're coming. They built us a house, we cleaned out a road. But the point I want to make is, I didn't know where God wanted me to go. I was praying, right? But how did God reveal His will? How did He reveal His will? It was actually through experience. Like, it was experience that did that. And that experience required that I would exhibit a godly character, and compassion, and mercy, right? It was expected that I would do that. And as I did, like what Christians should do, just live a life of compassion, and mercy, and generosity, and tenacity, and doing what you know is right. Like as I began doing that, that's when God's will was revealed. Right? So sometimes we want God to just tell us without us having to do anything. And it's in the course of doing what God wants that His will is often revealed. So I just want to point that out, like this talking about principle, that we need to hold on to that. I think it's a valuable, valuable, like if you want to think of like a tool that we have in our tool chest, right? Our communication with God tool chest. That's how He communicates often. It's just like doing His will is revealed in the experience. That's why I point that out. So we also have the humility. Look what time it is. We have the humility principle. I'm going to spend a few minutes here. And this is, to me, like, as far as life change in my personal life, this is one of the most powerful things I look back to. I was co-porting in Texas. Co-ported in Utah for a while. I did not do very well. I grew up, matured a little bit. I wanted to try it again. So I moved to Littlefield, Texas, and tried co-porting again. Was not entirely successful the second time. But anyway, some fascinating things took place. One of them, I ended up going to his house to sell a book. The daughter filled out a little card request. I could tell it was a child's handwriting. Right, I called, the mom said, yeah, come on out. So when I got there, it looked like the home was being used for like young people to, I don't know what they were doing, but they just kept coming and they'd go to these back rooms, like dark, dingy, like all the lights were off. And I didn't know what was happening there, but I didn't feel comfortable. Every time I walked in the house, I felt like it was in a bad place. And but the daughter, like, she wanted the books. And the mom's like, okay, I'll get the book for my girl if she wants them. But the mom didn't have money, so she would like pay little bits and pieces, and then she wouldn't pay, and I had to go back, and she'd pay a little bit. And when I would go out there, I'd meet these young people that were hanging out in the house. And this one young couple was there at the house, and when I showed up, you know, I began talking to them, and they're like, yeah, we want to live different than we are. And they're just trying to get themselves sorted out. I said, well, look, I got a couple of books here, and I offered them the Great Controversy and the Desire of Ages. I said, look, if you're just needing something to get you grounded spiritually, like these two books can help you out. And you read your Bible, you know, you've got that. And yeah, okay. I didn't have a copy of it. They didn't have any cash, no worries. So I had a couple of paperback copies. I said, I'll bring them to you next time I show up. Next time I came, I brought the books, but they weren't there. So I said, okay, can you just say them before I forget the names down, but for this couple. And the people hanging out there said, yeah, we'll give them to them. Some weeks later, I was driving in a different part of Littlefield, Texas, actually Lubbock, Texas. And it's kind of weird, like I was in a part of the town that I'd never been to before. And it's like the car was driving itself. I never had it happen prior to or since, but like it was just driving. I was sitting behind the wheel, but like this car was going somewhere I didn't intend to go. And driving through different streets that I'd never been on before, and I would think, I need to get back to this doctor's office. I'll leave some cards, a little card wraps for the Bible story books. And it's like the car kept driving itself. And I started feeling weird, like this is kind of a weird thing. I've never had it happen before. And I said, Lord, I need to, I'm a servant of yours, I'm a co-worker, I need to use my time wisely, and I'm not doing it right now. You know, and it's like, you gotta help me, I don't know why I'm doing this. And eventually I determined, look, I am pulling into this next parking lot, I don't care what happens. And so I got up to the next parking lot, I grabbed that chick lunch, and it just pulled right in. So pulled in, stopped. I said, Lord, what in the world is going on? And as I said that, I had air conditioning on the car, it was hot, the window was down. I heard someone yell my name, hey Dale! I looked out the window, and there's that young couple. It was a laundromat. So they saw me, and they, I was like, oh, hey, hi. And they came down the steps. I picture in my mind now. I walked over to where I was, and we began talking. He's like, how are you doing? Oh, fine, fine, fine. He said, we're really trying to make a new start. We decided we're leaving Lubbock, Texas. We're going up to Denver, Colorado. We're going to start fresh. We just want to start fresh, like new friends, like just try to make a new fresh start and do what's right. I said, oh, good. We prayed together. He said, hey, did you get those 2 books that I left for you? They said, no, we didn't. So I left them for you. He said, you need those 2 books. Like they're going to help you to get spiritually grounded and to help you if you want to make a fresh start, you need to read those 2 books. And but no, we didn't get it. I said, do I have a copy? I do. So I reached out behind me, and I had a bag there, and I had a copy of the Desire Pages and Greg Carter's. Here you go. Fresh start. And I said, thank you. I left, they left, I've never seen them since. Fast forward, went to the beginning, came back, and I worked at the AFM main office training missionaries. And one day I got this, my boss, John Kent, came in and said, hey Dale, I got a call from Germany. There's like a huge youth group that wants to know if we would be willing to come out and just spend some time with the youth, have meetings with the youth, interact with the youth for a week, and then assist the youth in having an evangelistic campaign over the weekend. And would you be willing to go? Sure, hang out with youth for a week. I could do that. So we went to Germany, and we had a lot of fun. Like we had this, and these kids are typical kids. Like the guys were taking all the girls' shoes and hiding them, hanging them by the gymnasium roof. I don't know how they got up there, but they're just doing fun stuff. It was a lot of, we went out, we went for miles and miles and walked. They had this huge, it's like a combination park and a zoo. And you can have picnics out there, just a great place to be. And they have these bushes in a maze. Like these bushes about this tall, and like a huge maze. So once you get in there, like you have to like find your way out. And it's like, you guys want to play tag? So we were playing tag in this huge maze, like jumping over the bushes. Anyway, so long story short, we went out there into town. We were advertising the meetings the kids were singing, just great voices. And time came for the evangelistic campaign. And John and I, all week long, we were asking ourselves, like, if you take a sermon and cut it in half, because it has to be translated, like, if you got 40 minutes, you really have about 18. So, what are you going to say in 18 minutes? And there's also this cultural thing, like, I'm speaking in English, I've got this English, worldview, and they don't. Like, their worldview is quite different, and their lifestyle is different, so what can I say that would be relevant for these people? We were begging God. We spent hours praying, just asking God, hours doing what? Praying. Asking God, begging God, just to help us know what do they need to hear that we can offer? Right? Just what do they need to hear that we can offer in 18 minutes? And reducing down to like a simple point or two, illustrate it well, and just leave it. And so John is like, well, a lot of people wonder, like, does God exist? So I think it'd be good to deal with that. And no, does God know I exist? Like they think God's out there, but He doesn't know I need to be here. And then you need to know, not only does God know you exist, but God cares. Okay, so God cares. And we begin building this little picture of beginning very slowly. One night, God knows I exist. Night 2, God cares. Night 3, God actually has a plan for my life. And begin building, the time that we had. Each meeting, one more step. And so he had several nights. I had several meetings. I had several meetings over the weekend. I had the last one. And John and I would go for these prayer walks in the morning, and we would practice our sermons on each other. So I would practice mine, and he would critique it. He would say, this you're spending too much time here. And he said, like, this word you're using, they're going to have a hard time translating it. And so we began very carefully just trying to fine-tune each other's presentations, and then begging God to give us the right illustrations to use, the right stories, working together. And so as we began the presentations, working our way through the meetings, we got to the very last night, and it was my job. I was the one to be speaking. And so I stood up to speak, and as I got up to the front, the youth leader came over to me. He was like, hey Dale, stop for a second. Okay, so I stopped. He said, I gotta mention something here. He said, so at the back of the lobby, back of the church, we have a whole bunch of books we want to offer people. And we want you to, like, when you're done with you're done with your talk, and you're all finished, we want you to make an announcement. We have all these free books in the back. And then he left. And as I went up and sat down, I told myself, I am not doing that. Like, it's an evangelistic campaign. What do you do at the very end? You make an appeal, right? An altar call. Like, I know my job. I'm not going to go up there, give an altar call, and say, oh, by the way, we have a bunch of books in the back in the lobby. You can pick them up on the way out. I'm not doing that. I'm making an altar call. We're having a prayer for the people. We're lighting up the front. Like, I knew how this evangelistic campaign was going to end. And I was not making an appeal for books or an advertisement for books. And so I stood up there. They asked me to sit down. I did. They had a few announcements. And my brain was plagued because I told myself, look, I have been begging God for weeks, ramping up to this. We're critiquing each other, going on these long prayer walks, planning this all out. God showed us what He wants, and I'm not deviating from that. Like, I'm not going to just take some last-minute thing and toss in here. That's going to disturb the program. I'm not doing it. But I really like the youth pastor. Like, I didn't want to hurt his feelings. And I was saying, Lord, I don't know what to do. I'm not giving this, announcement, but I don't want to hurt his feelings. I don't know what to do. So I just felt that she'd sort him out. Okay, sort him out. And when my time got up to speak, as I stood up there behind the microphone, my brain was kind of busy. I don't know if you've ever done that. Pastors, I know you guys know, because the devil works hard on pastors before they get up to speak. That's when their wife is just going to be upset about anything. It'll be Sabbath morning. And if the kids are going to throw a tantrum, it's on the way to church. Anyway, I don't know if that's besides the point or not, but I'll just leave it where it is. My brain was busy, and I was trying to figure out how to make this work. And the subject of the night was that God has a plan for us, and sometimes He's using us, but we don't even know it. Okay, so, and I began talking. I shared a story I shared last night with the two kids having a dream. I didn't know what was going on. God just did, and then I mentioned the two kids and the two books, and I didn't know where I was going. I had no idea. God had a plan. He didn't tell me what it was, but it was happening nonetheless. And then I gave the two books to the two kids, and all of a sudden it dawned on me, now, Dale, now. I said, oh, by the way, in the back of the church, in the lobby, there's a bunch of books that are free. Anybody wants it. And two of the books that are available are the same two books that I offered to this young couple, Desire of Ages and the Great Controversy. If anybody is interested in making a new start in life, those books are back there. And all of a sudden I had this feeling of just happiness and peace. It's like God had this thing orchestrated. And everything's going to work out well. Finished the sermon, made the appeal, people came up. And I didn't know what they were saying. Obviously, they're speaking German, so I went in the back. But they were talking, and I could tell there's a lot of stuff going on. And this one lady stood up, and she was telling the youth pastor, I came here the first night, and I was thinking, God doesn't even know I exist. And he got up and said, yeah, God knows you exist. And I thought, wow. And I walked home thinking, He may know I exist, but He doesn't care. He said, I came back the next night, and he said, yeah, God knows you exist, and He cares. And I said, yeah, He cares, but He doesn't have a purpose for my life. He said, every night I came here, it's like, he actually addressed, my circumstances. And other people were saying the same thing. It was phenomenal. And one of the guys came back and told us, you wouldn't believe what's going on up there. And it dawned on me, look, we're really passionate about just taking these meetings and laying it before God's throne and begging Him to tell us what to say, subject matter, illustrations. We want Him to have control of the whole thing. And I walked away thinking He did it. He did that. And they had some refreshments. The youth came back and they asked us to go have some refreshments with them. We did. And those people there talking was kind of fun. And the young people said, hey, listen, could you go with us one more time to go out to eat? And go out to eat? It's 9:30. And we don't have transportation. We're walking everywhere. It's, yeah, if you go to town, a few miles this way, they have this big plaza, and it's all night food. They said, and one of the kids said, no one's ever spent time with us like you have. We just want to spend a little more time with you, because we have to leave the next morning. And so John said, yeah, we'll do it, man. We'll sleep on the plane, we'll do that. So we walked downtown, got to this plaza, they had this big empty spot, there's restaurants all around. Got a Mediterranean restaurant there, and I was perfect, I'm happy. I got falafel, pita bread, with all the sauces, and it was great. And so we pulled a bunch of tables together, and they all got this food from all the little places, pulled it in one spot. There was a bunch of us, it was just laughing and teasing each other. I love that about guys. Cool. Anyway, so we were just having a good time. And 1 o'clock in the morning, 1:30, we heard this door open behind us, and a lady screamed. And we all turned around. And this lady, she walked in, she got a dog on a leash, and she looked at us, and she says, Are you the guys that put on that evangelistic campaign? And the pastor's like, yeah, that was us. I had no idea what they were saying. They had to fill me in later. But it's just, oh. And was that the guy that's been preaching? He pointed at my friend John. Yeah. And it's just the guy that was talking tonight. And they said, yeah, that's him. I'm just looking at them, trying to figure out what was going on. But here's what happened. She told him, she said, listen, and she began at the beginning, I came to those meetings feeling like a nobody. God didn't know I existed. And she began relating how every night the meetings that they held addressed her specific concern. And she said, tonight, I just felt like, man, God must have a purpose in my life. I don't know what it is. I just wonder, what is that purpose? I want it. I want that purpose. I want to fulfill that purpose, whatever it is. I was wrestling with that. And he mentioned those 2 books in the back. I thought, I am not leaving here without those 2 books. As soon as we had the last amen, she was out the door, man. She grabbed those 2 books. She hustled back to her apartment, which was upstairs from where we were at, and she began reading The Great Controversy. She read for hours. She couldn't put it down. And so here it was 1:30 in the morning, and she's just, wow. And she said, wow, 1:30. My dog, he hasn't peed all day. So she goes over there, grabs the dog, and the dog, he's whining, he's good for leash on. She goes outside, she opens the door, and who does she see? The entire evangelistic crew. And she says, it's a sign. She says, God's trying to talk to me. He's calling me back. And she says, and I want to come. And she just began talking, and she was crying. It was just a beautiful event. And I remember going back to our room that night, and there's a handful of people that really touched by all of this going on. And just recognizing that, hey, look, God is a couple of things that I want to point out. The humility principle, I almost did not say anything at all about the books. Because I was convinced, I prayed to God, and He told me what He wanted to happen. Are you with me? It's easy to do, to feel like you have an in with God, He's talking to you directly, right? He's done that. Therefore, anything anybody else has to say is hogwash. It's easy to do that. Pastors can do that. Missionaries can do that. I don't know about people who work in the conference office, but I know the rest of us, it can happen. It can happen. I just want to warn you, we have to be very careful of that. The humility principle is huge. We need to recognize that God speaks to more than just us. Right? Even if He's speaking to us, He may also be speaking through somebody else. We need to be able to accept that. And even if it's at the last minute, just to recognize that, look, this communication with God thing, He doesn't always communicate directly to me. Sometimes He communicates through other people in ways I'm not expecting and not even wanting. And I think that's the scary thing. Like if I don't want that other voice, it's easy to turn my back on it. We have to really be humble. If we're really wanting God to talk to us, right, we need to be humble enough to accept where it comes from. Are you with me? Okay. I've got a few minutes left. Can you tolerate any more?
Yes.
Okay, just want to make sure. I'm going to do this in 30 seconds, and I'm going to move on. So you got what you asked for, principle. I know this has been covered over and over, so I'm not making a big deal about it. If you're asking for faith, what is faith? The substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things. You don't see it, man. So if you're asking for faith, you're asking for God not to show you. Are you with me? You're asking for it. Like if you're praying for faith, don't expect to see what you're needing to see. There's two ways you get it. One, you get the carpet pulled out from underneath you. Number two, you learn to step off the carpet. I personally prefer to step off the carpet. And that means doing something I know is right, even though I don't see all the answers in front of me. Quite often, we want to build up faith, we want to see everything before we do anything. And we can't do that. Especially when we need to get out and get the world evangelized. We need to be people of faith and not expect all the answers to be laid in our lap before we do anything. So just sit that up. Oh man, I just feel like I'm getting behind. So the picture roll principle. So this is one that is one of my personal favorites. I have a whole chapter dedicated to it. I'm going to quit talking about that. If I can say anything else, someone's going to ask me, so where is that? So I'll just ignore that. So here's the point. So back in, we had been in the field for a number of years, came back on furlough, and this lady worked at our office, Cheryl Vance. I don't know if you know her, bless her soul. She's deceased now. But she was a volunteer. She was in her 70s, worked in her home office. And she, as I walked to the office, she's like, "Hey Dale." I said, "Yeah." She goes, "I have something for you." And she gave me this picture roll. And it's like, I don't use those picture rolls because all the people are white. The people I work with have brown skin. And they have a traditional belief that white people are the dead ancestors, they come back to life. And it's really problematic. It's like, if all these people in these picture rolls have white skin, it's like we're talking about the world of the dead. Like that's how they're seeing it. Like, so we're not doing that. I've had people come over to me and said, could you, like my daughter died like a few weeks ago. I just want to know how's she doing. Like they thought I was like had access to the world of the dead. I could tell them about their relatives. Anyway. That's a distraction. So Cheryl wanted me to have this picture roll, and I told her no. It's a distraction. I don't need it. And she insisted, "No, you have to have the picture roll." And I said, "No, I I can't use it. So it's the color of the skin, it's really problematic. I have another set of patrols that have darker skin, and they work a lot better for us. So I can't use that one with the white skin. And she goes, but a donor gave it to us. You need to take it to the field. And like, you are in a village setting, like, you can use this. No, I can't. I really like Cheryl. Like, she was like a mother to me. Like, I love that lady. She was beautiful. And she insisted I had to take that control. So, okay, I'll take it. In mind, I'm thinking, I'm going to take it. I'm going to lean it up against the wall of my little house. And like, my house, if you knew my house looked like, you know, like, there's slats in the floor when the wind blows, like linoleum, which is like blow up in the air, you know. You know, we had cockroaches. I don't know how to tell you how many cockroaches lived in our house. We had snakes in the house, like massive spiders in the house. Like, we lived in a house, man. We had huge frogs in our house. Right? We had a snake that was like 7 feet long. And when we first got there, it was like a little pencil snake. And I told my wife saw it. Ah! Okay, I'll get the little pencil snake out. So by the time we've been in for a few years, like, we had this snake taller than me, you know. And I got up one night, and my wife's like, "What are you doing?" I said, "Well, there's a snake there trying to get out. Leave it alone. It eats the mice and the rats and the cockroaches." So we had this, you know, huge snake skin. We shed a skin over top of her stove. It didn't bother her a bit. And I came home. I had to make a trip one day. Came back, and I had hired. He was a good friend of mine. I asked him, "Could you please?" Like, if my wife has to go anywhere, can you go with her just to be her bodyguard? And he's like, yeah, don't do that. So he's their bodyguard. So they walk off this trail somewhere, and my wife goes, on the way back, there's this tree that fallen across the road. And so they get closer to it, and my wife looks at it and says, "Oh, that tree's moving." So it's like this massive python, you know, it's like going across the road, like, whoa, that is moving. You know, it's like, can you imagine? No, yeah, that's it. Like looking for a log, she gets it, ah! She tries to, and it just bounces off, like it's just muscle, you know. And this guy, I asked, "Could you be my wife's bodyguard?" He's like, "Oh, no!" So we had this house, all this stuff, and like we're out, like we're not in town. Just sleep like that. So, and in my mind, I'm thinking, I'm going to take that patrol, I'm going to put it in that house, in the next 2 months, the cockroaches are going to eat. Like, in my mind, that's what I'm thinking. And I thought, okay, you need to be responsible then. I'll go get a piece of pipe, PVC pipe, put that in there, cap it, and be responsible with it. So, we took it back. And it's a long journey. Finally got way back up to the house. I put it up against the wall. I will never use this patrol. We had a training event. We did leg worker training. Basically, it was like young people that wanted to be leg counselors. We had this training thing we did every year after. It usually take a month of training. And we deal with the culture, the various cultures they worked with, and the area where discipleship and culture overlap, right? So, and worldview. So we wrestle with that together. So, one of these guys, way up in the bush, he started his own little mission project. And so he asked me if I could go up there to give him a hand, right? So I got in the habit of every year we'd go up there with him. We had like a combination camp meeting, lay worker, like practical training. Camp, and so I had to hike up there, and so it was like days, like the days to get up hiking to get up there. So we got ready to leave one day for this trip. I started heading out, and the guys are waiting for me outside. Someone had already walked up the road. And I thought, okay, so I got everything. I got my clothes, I got medication, I got a few crackers to get on the way, and getting ready to go. And you always pray, so look, am I forgetting anything? You know, and just asking, dedicating the trip to God, so look, just be with us. There's snakes out there, like there's malaria, like there's a lot of things that could happen. Please keep us safe. We got a word of prayer. And it's like, Dad, you gotta read that picture roll. So I went in the house, looked at it, like, I don't need the extra weight, and I can't use it. So I started leaving again, Dad, I gotta get the picture roll. No, I don't. I looked, it's like, no, I don't want it. Like, I can't use it. So I went outside, and my wife is watching me. And so I went outside, and I got ready to go. Like, I can't go. I came back in, looked at that picture. I did not want it, but I couldn't leave without it. So I said, fine. Got the picture roll, put it on my shoulder. My wife told me later, she was like, I watched, she was like, God, please use my husband. Like, she was dead serious. Like, if you knew the trail, like if you knew the trail, like, she needs your help. And she knew that something was going on with this picture roll. I said, help my husband to accomplish whatever it is that we have here to accomplish. I headed down the trail. Days later, I climbed up this mountain. Now, I don't know how to explain, like, this massive rainforest, these mountains, and no trail. Like, there are trails, but like this wide, and they disappear. You know, and the trail would like into the river. You can walk up river in the water for like a mile, then climb up, go up a hill, go down another river. Like it's hard to find the trails, and there's landslides and rains and swamp. Like the roads are never the same. And so I always had to have people that like they have this internal GPS. Just these guys know those places. So we were climbing up this hill, and as I got up the top, I was on the very top. I began walking across. This kid comes from the other side, and he's walking across this way. So we're going in two different directions, and I'm going up that way, he's going to go up that way. As we cross, I said, hey, how you doing? Fine. And I use a term in Pidgin that means like, you're from where and you're going, or coming. It's like, oh, I'm from way over there. And he points over the mountains and says, I'm going over there. He said, actually, I was born over there. I got 3 minutes, man. He said, I was born way over there. He said, over that mountain, over that next mountain, and over the one just beyond that, I was born way over there. And he says, but when I was little, just a little guy, I got up one morning and these enemies came in and they attacked our village. And so I got up here and screaming and yelling, and people were running all over the place. And I got out, and like they were killing my family. And he says, I ran, like I just ran screaming into the forest. And I just kept running, you know, and eventually I wanted to get rid of all the noise and the horror of what was taking place there. And I waited, like sometime later, I don't know if it was days or whatever, I don't remember him telling me that way. He said, I came back into the village and everybody was dead, like the whole village was slaughtered, bodies laying everywhere. So I turned around and just walked back into the forest. And so I had a sister married in a different tribe, so I went over to stay with her for a few days, and I had to leave. I said I couldn't stay there, so I left. So I crossed all those mountains, and came across here, and I walked across these other mountains, and finally got to another place way out that way. And I walked in this community, and like I'd never seen, like, he said, my people are so primitive, like the world doesn't even know they exist. And he said the government doesn't know they exist, like they're just out there. And he said, when I walked in this little community up this way, there's this Adventist pastor there, and he saw me, and he's like, this kid, like he just looks devastated, you know. And he just walked over slowly, and he's reached out, put his arm on me, and took me back to his house, and he adopted me. He fed me, got me some clothes, sent me to school. He's a pastor, so I listened to him preach. I learned about God. I learned about the God of salvation, kindness, when he takes the weapons and turns them into plowshares. Like I learned about that. He said, I just love God. And so I was going to school, and we have summer holidays, and it just dawned on me, like, my people don't know about this. He says, I decided I'm going to take the gospel to my people. And so during his summer holidays, they had like 6 weeks, 5 weeks, he determined This is not a big guy. It's like he's like, I would guess like 15, 16 years old. He's committed to cross all those mountains on his own and take the gospel back to his tribal people. His village has been wiped out, but at least his tribal people are there. He's to bring the gospel to his tribal people. And we talked together, and at home I was a Seventh Adventist missionary, and we prayed together. And I said, look, I'm really proud of you. Like I said, I'm really proud of you. And I am. I still am. Like I wish I could find that guy and just get the rest of the story, right? And so we parted ways. We prayed together, parted ways. He began walking on the trail, and he stops and says, you know the only thing I wish? I said, what's that? He said, I just wish I had a picture roll. So you want a picture roll? He says, yeah. I said, I've got one. I've got one. And I gave it to him. He's like, wow, where'd you get that? I said, it's a long story. He took it, and I've never seen it since. So the thing that stands out to me is like, I had been praying that God would bring the gospel to all the tribal groups around. Like, I've been praying that. But in my mind, how is God doing that? Like through my ministry, right? And the people I'm training, that's how He's doing it. Right? And so, in my mind, I had this preconceived idea of how the work is going to be done. God's not limited to that. He's not limited to that. And there's a few other lessons I'm going to restrict my lesson to prayer. I don't know who all was involved who sent that ritual, but God obviously spoke to somebody, and they listened to him. Cheryl, God obviously was speaking to Cheryl. And I didn't hear him talking. She did. Right? And get back to our village. I was arguing with God over this picture roll. Right? And sometimes God asks us to do things that aren't really practical. Like, because I don't know what the picture roll is going to be used for. Like, if I do, I say, yeah, sure, I'll take it. But I didn't know this guy existed. You know, and I think we have to, as we're praying, ask God for guidance, we need to accept the fact that sometimes God has things for us to do. We don't understand. Like, we're not there. Like, we can't make a judgment call because we're not equipped to make a judgment call. Does that make sense? Yeah. So as we talk about communicating with God, we need to recognize that. Like, we need to give God space to do what He needs to do with us, even if we don't understand it and we can't comprehend it anyway. Just give Him the space He needs to work. Right? And I'm not an advocate for impressions. In fact, the other thing I want to talk about had to do with church unity and impressions and how God reveals truth to the church at large, right? The most of our conversation is how God reveals truth to us as individuals, but there's a whole different section when it comes to prayer, communication with God, and how that relates to the group, right? But leaving this pictorial incident, beside us, so we can have a last word. I just want to encourage you to recognize that God may want to use you in ways that you currently don't understand. I'd just like to ask that you would give God space to do that. Give God space to do that. Make sense? Thank you. Let's have a word of prayer. Lord God, I just like to tell you thank you for your love and mercy. Thank you for the opportunity we have to just be here and talk about prayer, talk about you, talk about the many ways that you have used your people in the past, and ways that you would like to continue using us to build your kingdom and to bring the gospel to all the world. I just pray that you help each of us to be faithful and to learn, to take what we're learning and apply it, and to be responsible with the truth that you've given to us, and to be responsible with the relationship that you offer us. For Christ's sake, amen.